Welcome back, everybody. I'm Giles, and it's time for another live chat. And we're going to be talking about hi fi. And I've been joined by Joe Profito. And one day, if you get a chance, ask him about the best way to remember his last name. It's not something we're going to cover here, but you should ask him. There's a wonderful story there. And we're going to talk about his company, Clarus Cables. And first off, Joe, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on with us today.
Thank you, Giles. Thanks for asking me to join you today.
Oh, I'm super excited. I love this stuff. And I think maybe to get things kicked off, there are probably a handful of people out there that are not familiar with the brand, not familiar with you. So maybe you can give us a little bit of history of yourself, and then we can segue from there into details around the company itself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, first, I'm a Bronx boy. I was born in the Bronx, born and raised in the Bronx, and public school, PS 83, Mount St. Michael High School, and
Nice.
NYU in the Bronx. College of Engineering, graduated with a degree in electrical engineering. And summer of 1960, from 63, from June through November, I had the pleasure of working at NBC Studios in New York, Channel 4. And I ran camera in that for the local 6 o'clock and the 11 o'clock news. So that was a lot of fun. And in between those times, between 6:30 and 10:30, I was free. And in those years, Carson shot, the Tonight Show was in New York, and it was in RCA, in the RCA building there, 30 Rockefeller Plaza. And I would go to the 6th floor and stand behind the cameras and watch the show be taped. And that was a lot of fun. That was just a blast to be able to be part of that. I didn't know it at the time. Now we look back, of course, but at that time it was tons of fun. And after that, I was an ROTC at college, so I wound up in the Air Force, and I spent 5 years in the Air Force as a pilot. And when I left that, I went to work at the Stereo Shop in Hartford, Connecticut. And I spent about 5 years at the Stereo Shop and selling Macintosh products, along with lots of other wonderful JBL products, Advent products, Nakamichi, all those great products back in those years.
Good stuff.
And then I got hired by Gordon Gow, who was the president of Macintosh, hired me to be the Southeast Regional Sales Manager for the company. So I left Connecticut and went south, flew to Atlanta, lived in Atlanta, and covered the Southeast United States, and then became national for Macintosh in the early 80s. And in 1989, Gordon, who was my mentor all these years, I worked directly for him. He passed away suddenly. Company got sold to Clarion. They wanted me, and by the way, I was living in Orlando all these years, and Clarion wanted me to move to Binghamton, New York, if I wanted to stay with the company. And I said, nah, I don't think so. I think I'll stay in Orlando. So I left the company and decided to start my own company, and I started Gordon J. Gow Technologies, which is the parent company that I started, and it's incorporated under that name, Gordon J. Gow Technologies, Inc. And the brand we started with was Tributaries, which was an offshoot of Tribute, and I started the company as a tribute to Gordon. And we continued that from 1991. And then we were making, by the way, audio cables, basically audio cables and video cables, and very successful. And we got very much involved in the custom installation part of the business, because we were selling bulk wire along with our audio and video cables. And then we started working with some companies to develop power conditioning products. And in 2002, 2003, we ran into Jay Victor. Now, Jay at the time has he had some companies that he worked for in China, that one of them was a power conditioning manufacturer. And we worked with him, and he helped us develop some power conditioners for our Tributaries line. Well, during that same time frame, I was wanting to get some traction with the high end community with
Sure.
tributaries cables, and kind of got shot down by one of the magazines who referred to our cables as home theater cables. No,
Oh
not
gosh.
not high end audio cables, home theater cables. Well, I was talking with Jay about this, and he said, "Well, maybe we ought to take a look at some of my patents." And I said, "Didn't know you had any patents." He's come to find out Jay has about 50 patents, many of them in high end cable design. So we looked at the patents and looked at the abstracts, and this is very, very interesting. It was these patents was based on the idea that we could have a signal flowing through a cable and kind of control how that signal flowed, the tonal balance of it by the types of types and shapes of the conductors, which I had never come across. And the centerpiece of the cable is the flat cable. Now in a Clarus cable, there's one big flat copper bar that runs through the cable. And this part of the cable controls the mid-range response. And then there's a heavy duty cables, heavy round cables for the low frequency, and spiral ribbons for the high frequency. Well,
Okay.
I asked Jay to tell me about this, and he said, well, it all started because he was experimenting with different shapes of cables. He wanted to hear what the differences were from different shapes. And he started with a flat cable. And when he played a flat cable, in other words, he connected it between amplifier and speaker, he found that he had a great mid range, a really rich sounding, uh, pure mid range, but the low frequencies and high frequencies were subdued.
Hmm.
Then, when he took just solid round conductors, he found that he would get great bass response, but again, subdued mids and highs. Now he was looking at how to get the high frequency section, and he came up with using tinsel wire. Now, tinsel wire, if you think about a Christmas tree and tinsel on a Christmas tree, if you took that really thin film, metal film, and wrap it around a core, you could make a pipe or tube.
Isn't that
And
what we see for shielding sometimes? A similar type of weave?
that's right. Yeah, that's how the cables generally are shielded with that type of a shielding. But he put a non-conductive core inside that. And I said, well, how does that work? I mean, what's the principle here? What's the theory behind it? And he said it all has to do with skin effect. So I said, skin effect. Okay, I remember I learned about skin effect in engineering, and that basically says that as a signal is passing through a conductor, the higher the frequency of the signal, the more the signal will tend to pass on the to the skin or the outside of the conductor. In fact, as you get up into the higher frequencies, megahertz frequencies, the signal is only on the surface. There's nothing in the inside or on the interior of the conductor. Everything is on the surface. So Jay from this figured, well, if that's the case, that means that as frequency goes down, that the frequencies, the signal will tend to flow in the center of or closer to the center of the conductor, depending upon the frequency. Okay, that makes sense. So high frequencies like surface area. Well, what has the most surface area in a conductor? And that would be a tube or a pipe,
Mhm.
right? Because it has an outside surface and an inside surface area, lots of surface area. And if you make it really thin, then the high frequencies will really tend to flow in that conductor. Well, you can't use a pipe, obviously, because you can't bend a pipe. And so you must have flexibility. So the idea of taking a tinsel type of film and wrapping it would solve the problem of flexibility, because now you could bend it.
Mhm.
Okay,
That
and
makes
then
sense. Yeah.
the low frequencies would go through the heavy conductor, and the flat wire is kind of in the middle. It has surface area, but it's thin. If you make it thin enough, it has that surface area, but it also has some thickness to it. So the mid range tends to like that. Is exactly this is what we found. So now he spent the next 8 years developing the ratios of how many of the low frequency conductors, what gauge should they be? How about the tinsel wire? What is the thickness of that? How is it wrapped? And the flat wire, how flat is flat? How wide should it be? How thick should it be? But he had the advantage of being part owner in a wire company in China, so they would make him small runs of wire. Let me give you an example. If I go to that same company and I
Mhm.
say to them, "Hey, I'd like you to make me this run of this cable, and it has this many conductors. These are the gauges. These are the dielectrics. This is the shielding, so on and so forth." And they'd say to me, "Fine, Joe, we can do that. 5,000 meters minimum, and you pay the startup costs." Well, that could be anywhere from 15 to 30 to 40 to $50,000, depending upon what you're building. I say, no, no, no. I just want to make some samples. Well, sorry, that's the minimum. Well, if I was the owner of the company or part owner of the company, they would make me a 100-meter roll, which is what they did for Jay. So he was able to make these small runs and make adjustments. So he could then take the wire, listen to it, and say, no, it doesn't have the right bass response, or it doesn't have the right high frequency response, or the mid range, and then make adjustments until he came up with the signal flow, the sound of the cable that he wanted, which was neutral. The Clarus cables are an extremely neutral cable. They don't favor the low frequencies. They don't favor the high frequencies. Mid frequencies are just as real as can be. So that's how we came across. That's how I came across Jay. And as we looked at this, I thought, wow, this is amazing. We listened to some samples that he had done. I said, this is a no brainer. We have to do this. So we signed a contract with Jay, and we license his patents, and we have our cables made to his specifications. Now he did all the inside design, so all the internals are that meet the patent requirements. Our company did all the cosmetics. We did all the outside jacketing design, the connectors, all the bits and pieces that bring it together. So this is all done, and everything, by the way, that we do with Clarus, these are all handmade cables. All the
Nice.
product, all the connectors, the breakout pieces, the jacket, everything is proprietary, and everything is done for each specific cable, because we have two levels of cable. We have aqua and crimson. Crimson is the higher level, or crimson is the embodiment of the patent. So everything that's in the patent is in crimson. Aqua is a step down from that. The connectors for each line, whether it's RCA, XLR, banana plugs, spade lugs, they're specific for the cable that they're in. We don't multitask connectors. Each
Sure.
cable is designed and made for specific cables, and we make a complete selection of audio cables, um, analog audio, balanced audio, digital audio, both RCA, XLR, and then speaker cables, both by wire and what we call 2-to-2 standard speaker cable. And those are two different cables completely. A lot of companies use one cable and they multitask it for by wire or standard. We don't. Our by wire cable is different than our standard cable. And
Okay.
then our power cables. Our power cables are really, if we look at the whole line, the power cables are what we would call the standouts. That's what we get the most responses back from our consumers, our end users, our Clarus customers have to do with our power cables. And we have two types of power cables. We have the high current power cable, and then a source power cable. And just to give you an idea, on the Crimson side, the high current power cable is an 8 gauge cable, and that cable, a 6 foot cable of that, has a retail cost of $3,000. And then there's the source power cable, which is a bit less than that, of course, because that one's a 10 gauge power cable. So as we
So I'm
yeah,
pulling up the website here so people
okay,
can see this a little bit.
sure,
So, there are like you said, the two lines, the crimson and the aqua. And if you look inside a crimson, we've got audio, we've got AES, cables, power, speaker, balanced, XLRs, digital audio, and this would be looks like coax right there, and then power,
right,
and then bi-wire cables.
right. Yes, and all those cables, by the way, everything is made here in Orlando. These are all handmade cables, and they're labeled as made in USA from foreign and domestic parts.
Right on. I
So,
gotcha. Yeah.
so that's our line, and that's the cable line.
And then
We
just
all
specifically, I can see here on the aqua side, when we look at power, we can see aqua power amp and aqua power. So the power would be for source type component, and then the power amp would be for those higher current devices.
Yes, exactly. and
Perfect.
it's and it's more than just gauge. Yes, the high current cable is a heavier gauge than the source cable, but there's also, one of the things that we do in our cables is the windings that we accomplish internally, how the cables are actually wound inside, determines the output of that cable, and also the noise output of the cable, especially on the power cables. We use some very interesting, what's called topology, right? The wiring technique to reduce noise, because, in a home, anybody's home, most everybody, unless you live in the city of Chicago, I think it's the only one, that our homes are all wired with Romex wire, right?
Hmm.
And Romex wire is unshielded copper wire. So you live inside a huge antenna, basically. Your house is an antenna. And all the RF that's around, all the radio waves from TV, radio, cell phones, you name it, that runs through the atmosphere and the environment, is inducing these high level signals into the wiring in your home. And that's all riding piggyback on top of that 60 hertz uh, voltage that you're going to be using to power your products. Then you have things in your home like refrigerators that have motors, air conditioners that have motors, and when they turn on and off, they put all kinds of stuff, what I call um, uh, it, um, stuff impurities on
Sure.
that 60 cycle wave. So now when you plug in your components, and you're going to use the power from the wall now to take your perfectly beautiful musical signal that you've just downloaded and streamed in, that's pristine, or that you have a phonograph and you're taking from a turntable, from a high level cartridge, bringing it into a preamp, and you're going to take that musical signal and now mix it along with that AC signal that's got all that junk on it. And of course, that's what happens, is that now that's what the signal is going to look like when it transfers into the amplifier, and it gets amplified. And of course, now you have musical signal that has impurities on it. Now, will you hear it as a buzzing or a humming? Probably not. But this word that we use to describe some of these things, the word we use is noise. And in a lot of cases, it's not a good word, because it's not descriptive. I'll give you an example, Giles. I was doing an Expona a couple of years ago, and I had my own room, and I had an old Macintosh set up and Sonus Faber speakers, and I had power conditioner, my power conditioner. Somebody came into the room and he said, "Oh, what do you do?" Just end user, now consumer. "Well, what are you doing? What's going on in this room?" And I said, well, we're showing our power conditioner. Oh, well, what does that do? Well, power conditioner removes noise from the system so that you have clean systems. Oh, I don't have any noise in my system. And I said, oh, no, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about humming or buzzing. That's a different kind. If you've got humming or buzzing, power
That's a bigger
conditioning,
problem.
that's not what this is about. And it dawned on me, I was using a word that was over descriptive. It was not what we're trying to talk about, because what we're trying to talk about is the information that's embedded in a musical signal. There's so much information in that signal, not just the sound. It's not just the sound of the instruments or the vocalists. It's the signal that gives us our audible clues and cues as to where they are in the sound stage. How big is the sound stage? How wide is the sound stage? The high frequency clarity, the low frequency tightness. There's all kinds of things that are embedded in there that we're not going to hear if it's obscured.
Mhm.
And that's what's happening. There's this obscuring of signal of detail that we don't know is there because you can't hear it. Right? If you can't hear it, then you don't know it's there until you remove the obscuration. So it's kind of like lifting a blanket or taking a veil off of it. And all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'd never heard that before. And that's what most people will say when they have really good cables and the first time they tried it. And that's usually the comment. The signal is something, or the music that they hear, or things in that music that they've never heard before, because they were obscured by these impurities that get into the sound. So that's what the cables do. Basically, if they're done right and they're matched properly to the system, then you can really get that return on investment that we put into our high-end equipment so that we can hear the best.
Yeah, that's a great description. Now, you're not only cables. You talked about power conditioners. Let me pull the site back up, and
Mhm.
one thing that I want to show to everybody, because I think these are pretty cool. It's
Yeah.
the concerto, the duet, and the sextet.
Yep.
I think these are really nice pieces of kit. Can you talk about these just a little bit?
Sure. We started with power conditioning, and there's a lot of power conditioners that are on the market today, and most of them are transformer based power conditioning. In other words, the balanced line transformer. So it takes care of what's called common mode noise through the balanced transformer, and that relies on the fact that the noise that's coming in on the line and the neutral of the AC is the same going into the transformer, because the transformer's secondary has a reverse winding from the primary, so that one half of it is wound in one direction on the secondary, the other half is wound in the opposite direction. So noise that gets in on both lines, one is positive, one is negative. It's added together to get 120 volts. And when it is, the noise is removed. Great idea. It works. However, it doesn't work 100% because the noise coming in on the line and the neutral are never exactly the same. There's always a little bit of residual, and that's what sneaks through. The other noise that gets through is called differential noise, which is only on the line and runs out from the line and back out the neutral. So that
Right.
one doesn't get captured. Most power conditioners also just have one filter for everything, and that's how it's done. We don't do that. Our concerto has three different types of filters in it, and these are no transformers. These are all uh, filters. One's called a common mode filter, and that's for the analog system and the high current side, and then a differential mode system for the digital equipment. What we found is that these filters are specific for the different type of equipment. So analog equipment, what are we playing today that's analog? Basically, it's going to be a preamplifier if you're listening to tapes or you're listening to records. It's pretty much it today for analog. So that's what would plug into the analog outlets. The all the digital components we have could be a TV is digital. All the TVs are digital. CD players, DVD players, processors, DACs. All these would plug into the digital. Those devices will sound better plugged into the digital outlets than they will in the analog outlets. Really interesting. And I've had customers come back to me and say, you're right, they do. I've done it both ways, and the digital equipment sounds better plugged into the digital equipment. And I always depend upon my customers to tell me what they
Certainly,
found.
yeah.
Because what I think, it's like my children are gorgeous, I because they're mine, right? So it's
That's right.
always
Only a
communicating.
face a mother could love kind of thing, right?
Right. So I don't want to, never want to go on what I think. I always want to go on what my customers tell me, because they're the ones that are going to be listening to it from a completely objective point of view. And so that. Now, the other thing, so we have the analog filters for analog, we have the digital filters for digital components. The other one that's really special is the high current section. Most amplifier manufacturers today say, don't connect your amplifier to a power conditioner. Plug it into the wall directly. Now,
I've heard that before.
why do they say that? The reason they say that is because most power conditioners are current limiting devices. A big transformer in the unit is a huge it's a huge thing for restricting current flow. In fact, what you'll see on it is 120 volts, 12 amps. Well, wait a second. 120 volts is normally 15 amps.
Right.
So it's they lower the power because they know that the transformer is not going to allow full current flow. So what we did in ours, again, there's no transformer, but the filters do have an inductor in them. But in that common mode filter, the inductor that we're using is a 30 amp inductor. So that 30 amp inductor now is twice the capacity of the 15 amp unit, because the concerto is a 15 amp unit.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, we can connect a 1,000-watt amplifier onto it and play it. It's not going to current limit. It's not going to draw more than 15 amps continuously. Now, will it do it on an instantaneous basis? Sure. A loud strike of a drum or another, blast from an orchestra can bring that up to a high current, but for a very short period of time. And that inductor at 35 amp is going to handle that without any current limiting. So that was really the important part of it. So that's the basic design. Also in that unit, we have under and over voltage protection. So if the if the voltage drops below 90 volts, 85 volts, the unit shuts down.
That's
And
nice.
when the voltage comes back up to 90, it turns back on. Same thing if 135 volts, it turns off, and comes back to 130, it turns on again. That's a very important part. With today, a lot of places are going through brownouts and voltages dropping, and when that happens, you want to protect the equipment that's connected into it, and this will do that. It also has surge suppression. We use MOVs, and MOVs, those are metal oxide varistors. They're the fastest operating surge that's used in any electronics. And people say, oh, well, they fail. If you take a hit, they don't last long. We've been selling products with metal oxide varistors for 15 years. And I can tell you, I can count on one hand how many of these we've gotten back after thousands. I'm talking about power strips, tens of thousands of them. They don't fail.
Right.
They stay out. Now, the beauty of this one is that these are thermal sensing surge suppressors, thermal sensing MOVs. So if the temperature gets too hot in it, it will open like a fuse. But
Oh, wow. Okay.
But when the temperature comes back down, it resets. It resets. So they're thermal resetting MOVs, which is really a novel device which we use in this product. So that's basically Concerto, and it has 8 outlets on it, 2 for analog, 4 for digital, and 2 for high current.
That's awesome. Now, we're gonna draw down on our time now, but before we go, I wanna talk about 2 things. Got 2 questions. So, I wanna talk about new products that you've released, and then take a look toward the future and talk a little bit about what's coming, right? So, what's new and hot now, and, what do you see coming out into this year, maybe beginning of this year or next year rather, and what does that look like?
Okay, so one of the things that we've done on this past year is we introduced our Clarus cable Mark II, and in that those cables are all have new connectors on them. The pictures that you showed on the website, those are all the older pictures. Our new website should be up and running, by the way, hopefully by the end of the month, by the end of August, we should be up and
Oh, that's
running.
awesome. That's exciting.
And it has all the new connectors are on there. So all our new connectors we're using tellurium copper, beryllium copper, all these new copper alloys that have special features on them for springiness and hardness to make sure that we have the right connection. Everything is fitted properly. Spade lugs and banana plugs also. So those are all new. That's our Clarus cable Mark II. And everything we sell now is using those cables, and also the AC connectors are also Mark II. So everything is there. We also brought out not so long ago a DAC, a USB type DAC, and this has been very successful for us because it is the best performing USB DAC, in that price range. It's a $300 unit, and it's USB A, plugs into either a PC or you can use it with a phone. And we furnish one of the cables for Android phones, and if you want to use it with an Apple phone, you have to buy their cable that has a
Yeah,
camera adapter.
proprietary cable.
Oh yes, proprietary cable, but it has to be a camera adapter, or
Right.
else it won't bypass the DACs inside the phone, which is what you're trying to do, is avoid the DAC in the phone and go directly to our unit. Plug your headphones into that and listen to it. It's fabulous. 192 does it's actually 384. It's a 384 K device, so it's extremely high bit rate and sampling rates. And also with a cable, you can hook it up to your system. And we have a lot of people that use that as their main DAC, and they stream from Tidal or Qobuz or
Right.
Nirvana, and they use that for their source material, and they use ours as a DAC. So that's been very successful for us. And when we look at the future, well, that's one of the areas that we're moving forward in. Is we're working on the tabletop DAC that we want to bring out. Probably, hope maybe by the end of the year, beginning of next year, sometime, we'll have this device. Well, this would be a full-fledged DAC that would sit on a tabletop that would have all the capabilities for all the latest types of streaming content that you could do would come through this DAC. So that's one of the devices. And we're continuously looking at, we're going to be looking at producing more products in the high-end 2-channel range. So 2-channel electronics is where we're going. And that's where I'm steering the company, and where we're directing all our efforts are on the 2-channel side. And that seems to be what our customers want from us. They love our cables, and they're asking us to produce more products that will make their music better, and of
That's
course
super exciting.
make their life happier. So that's what we're doing.
That's really, really great. Yeah, I look forward to seeing the new DAC products.
Yeah, so do we.
I love those kind of products. I love analog, but I'm a digital guy too, so I love to see advances made in those technologies. All right, we've drawn to the end of our time, Joe. Thanks so much for coming on and telling us all about yourself, Clarus Cable, and your company is more than just cables, right? You're doing power, you're
Oh, yeah.
doing digital. It's really interesting the way that things are growing, and I think the common theme there, though, is you really want that high end customer experience, right?
We do, and when we get that feedback from our customers, it's really it's fulfilling. It's just it's really is good. We know we're going in the right direction. We know we're that doing things that people want, not what we want to do. Not just because
Right.
we want to build stuff. We're making things and creating products that our customers want. And when they get it and they come back and they say, I can't believe how good my system sounds now with your cables. What a difference. And they'll compare us to cables that are, I mean, 10, 15, $20,000 cables. And they'll tell us our cables sound as good or better than what they were using. So
That's awesome.
that's
Yeah.
very fulfilling. Yeah. Very gratifying.
Okay. Last question. I think maybe the most important. If people want to buy some of your cables, where do they get your cables from?
Well, we sell through a number of retailers in the U.S. Our most let's see, our Evolution Home Theater in Atlanta. Scott Carpenter is our number one Clarus dealer in the country. Overture in Wilmington, Delaware is another excellent one. Source AV Design Group in Torrance, California, another excellent Clarus dealer. And then we have a couple of online. Source AV Design Group has an online Clarus presence, and another online that we approve for selling our Clarus products is soundapproach.com. They sell our Clarus products online also. And there are numbers of others. There's a dealer locator on our website
Oh, great.
that you can see who also is selling our cables. But those are our top selling companies. Also, I must mention the Stereo Shop in Hartford, Connecticut. Also,
There you go. That's the one.
Okay, that's another great store, and that sells our cables too.
All right. Okay, Joe, thanks one more time for coming on. And everybody else out there, thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure to like and subscribe and share and do all those things that we YouTube people love. And with that, we'll call this one done. And I'll see you guys in the next video.
Thanks, John.